So I want to talk to you about friendship. The story is told about a guy who woke up one morning and he thought to himself, this is an amazing day. And he said, I think what I'm going to do to enjoy this amazing day is I'm going to go outside and I'm going to go for a walk. And so he went outside and he went for a walk and he looked around and he saw just how beautiful creation was. And while he was walking, he tripped and he fell in a hole. And this hole was a dark hole, a deep hole. And when he hit the surface of the bottom of that hole, he was hurt. And he looked up and he thought to himself, how am I going to get out of this hole? And time went by, and there were no people who seemed to notice that he was in this dark place. And then he heard the pitter-pat of a sound above him, and he thought, wow, this is someone who's going to be able to help me. And the person walked up and he looked down in the hole and he said, man, you're in a hole. That must really be tough. I bet you'll be able to get out of it. I'll see you later. And of course, he thought to himself, that was not helpful. And then time went by and it got a little bit more darker and a little bit more cold. And he went from being in a hole of pain to being in a hole of hopelessness. And someone else walked by and looked down in the hole and said, man, you're in a hole. What did you do to get in that hole? I mean, were you just not paying attention? I mean, so you have some sort of problem? You need to just kind of get your act together and get yourself out of the hole. And then the person walked off. And all of a sudden, that hole went from being a hole of pain to being a hole of shame. And you know what shame is, right? S-H-A-M-E. Should have already mastered everything. And then, just before he was about to give up all hope, some other person who he didn't even know jumped down into the hole with him. And he was so surprised, and he turned and he looked at this person. He said, what are you doing? I mean, don't you see how dark this hole is and how deep it is and how I couldn't get out of it? Now what are we going to do? What are we going to do about this predicament that we're in? And to his surprise and to his delight, this guy looked at him and said, buddy, I heard you crying. And so I came to get in this hole with you because I want you to know that I've been in this hole before and I know the way out. And so slowly, relying on each other, they went from this hole of darkness into the light. I'm not really sure in this modern age if we really have any sense of what friendship really is. I mean, we have so many different concepts of what friendship is. And with the advent of social media and all of our various connections, all of our friends, and if we're honest, we have friends that we don't even know, don't we? And we're linked into all kinds of relationships, and we have networks, like crazy networks of people that we can go to if we need something. And we have all the information that we could ever imagine. I mean, all you have to do is just Google somebody, and you can find out what they ate for breakfast this morning. That, in my opinion, is too much information. But in spite of all of these connections and all these networks and all this information, if we're really honest, what we're missing in our lives more than anything else is what keeps us alive, and that's intimacy and connection. You and I are wired for intimacy and connection. We may not want to admit it, but we are. And there's such a strong correlation between our sense of well-being and our flourishing in life and whether we have those connections that we really need. Consider, for example, this pop question. What's the loneliest place in the United States? I'm going to give you a choice. Are you ready for this? Loving County, Texas, population 67, the largest land mass in the United States by county with the smallest population, or San Francisco. What's the loneliest place? Apparently, you get more lovin' in Lovin' County. It's interesting, though, when you stop and think about it, that there really isn't a correlation between our intimacy and connection and people necessarily being around us. I mean, if we were really to stretch it out even to the most broadest sort of mind-blowing reality, why in a world of 7 billion people should any of us be lonely? Loneliness correlates directly with hopelessness. And conversely, friendship, connectedness, love correlates directly with our sense of hopefulness and our resilience, which is that capacity to deal with those challenges of life and get back up again and try again. There was a study done a number of years ago at a major university to sort of show this correlation between loneliness and hopelessness and connection and resilience. And what was asked was that people would climb a mountain, and the individuals were asked to climb a mountain, and then people were paired up as couples and were asked to climb a mountain. And you know what the statistics and research bore out. Those people who thought that they could climb that mountain by themselves ultimately scored the climb so much higher and more difficult than people who climbed with another person with them. In fact, the people that climbed the mountain with them not only scored the climb as less difficult, but they scored it as actually enjoyable. To be in joy is not necessarily to be in a place where you're just rocking it out, living the good life, being happy, happy, happy. To be in joy is to be in a place where you feel a sense of connection and hopefulness and the belief that no matter what happens, you'll find a way to live through the challenge. And yet we know also that not all friendship is equal. I mean, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could just sort of take friends, all of the people that we call our friends, and group them in one category and say they're all just the same in terms of what they offer us and what we offer them. But we know that's not true. So, thousands of years ago, Aristotle said that there were really 3 different kinds of friendships. And I think it's so true even to this day. The first category of friendships was what he called pleasure friendships. These are your ESPN and People magazine friends. These are people that are just so fun to hang out with, and you drink a beer or you go do something together and you laugh and you tell jokes and you blow off steam, and it's just wonderful. And by the way, we need these friends. But these are not Foxhole friends. The second category, Aristotle said, was what he called advantage friends, or what we might call transactional friendships. And these are, of course, the sort of relationships that our economic system is built upon. If you think about all of the relationships that you may have in business, and these are important relationships, but they're only relationships that bear out and stay true as long as the other individual in the relationship is getting something. And when that advantage is no longer there, it tends to be the case that that relationship fades. This is not what I will soon define as a Foxhole friend. But then he said, there is this other category of friendship, the highest form of category, which he actually defined as a virtue friendship, which is a friendship that is based on nothing other than a commitment to the other individual. What the Greeks called agape love. A love and a commitment rooted not in what I get from the relationship, but in the sanctity and dignity and virtue of the other person. This is what I want to argue is the basis of Foxhole friendship. And so if we stop and think about, if we were right now to do an inventory of all the people in our lives that we call our friends and that think of us as friends, because we would do also well to think about what category we fall in the relationships with others. Where would we group our friendships? How many of them would be pleasure friends? How many of them would be advantage friends? And how many of them would be true friends? To me, this is the deepest question that we need to explore within ourselves as we think about our lives and as we think about our renewal and our sense of resilience that we need in our lives and that other people need around us. Studies tell us these days that the state of true friendship, of Foxhole friendship, is not very good. Whereas numbers of years ago, people reported out that they had 3 or 4 friends. The average person says now that they only have 1 friend. And in my opinion, that isn't enough. Nor is it something that we have to settle for. So the big question, how do we know if someone is a true friend? How do we know if they're a Foxhole friend, if they're that person who's willing to get into the hole with us and help us fight our battles and to overcome our challenges? How do we know? Well, the truth of the matter is we really can't know until something happens in our lives that knocks us down and we find ourselves in pieces. When I was a little boy, my mother told me that the most important thing that I could do in my life was to make sure that I always had 5 true friends. And like a typical teenager, my response was, yada, yada, yada. And like a lot of people, I sort of was at a place where I had people around me and I felt like I had a lot of friends and all was good. And then something happened that happens for people in the modern age. I began to move. So I had some friends in Virginia where I started off, and then I went to graduate school in Connecticut. And I sort of lost touch with some people in Virginia and made some new friends. And then after that, I moved to Georgia. And I lost touch with some Connecticut friends, but I made some more friends in Georgia. And then I moved to Virginia, and I lost touch with some people in Georgia and made some new friends in Virginia. And then I moved to Texas. And I lost touch with pretty much everybody over there on the East Coast as I lived into a new job and a new family and a lot of new things. But I made some new friends, some life-giving friends. And then I moved right here to my home, North Carolina. And you know what I did when I moved? Just like you did when you moved here, you went to work trying to figure out how to live. And then all of a sudden, my life experienced a major event. I got a phone call on a February morning, a morning when I, like that guy that I told you about in the first story, thought that it was just going to be one of those great days. And I got up, and as I was getting ready to go out the door, I got a telephone call. And the voice on the other line said, "Chip, I'm so sorry. Your father is dead." I was so shocked. But more than being shocked, I was so incredibly devastated because I'd had such a complicated relationship with my father. My father was a raging alcoholic. And as you know, alcoholism is a terrible disease, but it's really about a disease that destroys individuals and destroys families and destroys children. And I had always this illusion that I would somehow be able to help my father. I mean, that's really kind of what children tend to do in those relationships. And that really is the definition of codependency. I mean, codependency is really a disease of good ideas. That if I can just come up with a better idea, I can make someone well. But you and I both know that no one ever in the history of humanity has ever gotten another person well. And so my father was gone, and the opportunity for his recovery was gone. And not only that, the opportunity for him to have a relationship with me and have a relationship with my family, that was gone too. And I just was experiencing such incredible trauma. But I didn't want to tell anybody, because when people asked me how I was doing, I was fine. And you know what fine means, right? F-I-N-E, freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And to make a long story short, my ultimate Foxhole friend, my wife, knew that I was having serious anxiety and serious depression. And so she called up a friend of mine who called me up one day and said, "Chip," which is how they talk in Texas, "go to the airport." Go to the airport? Really? Imagine having that request. He said, "I know that you're in trouble, and I know that your wife has canceled all your appointments, so go to the airport." And so I went to the airport, and I flew up to New York, and I met Tom. And we sat in a room, and he said, "You're not leaving until you tell me exactly what you're feeling." And so I just swept out my soul, and I just bawled my eyes out to the point that I had to almost curl up in a fetal position. And then I took a massive nap. And then after that, I went out and had a great dinner with him, and we talked and we laughed. And then I got up the next day thinking this is like a totally surreal experience. I just did this. And I came home to Charlotte, and all I could think of is, I've just experienced the most profound feeling of love. And I never want to be lonely again. You see, my friends have taught me some really important things about friendship, and I just want to share them with you because I think they're worthy of your consideration. And that is, first and foremost, to have a friend, a deep friend, guess what? You can't just expect for them to show up. You got to be one. And what I've learned about true friendship, about Foxhole friendship, is that Foxhole friends have a couple of different qualities about them. One, they're real people. They're not phonies. They're wounded healers, and they're fellow strugglers, and they're willing to accept your truth because they know they have truth and life is messy, but it's all going to be okay if we stick together. Second, they speak truth. They speak truth to you. Sometimes, as the movie goes, we can't handle the truth, but we need to hear the truth. But their truth that they tell us always seeks to build us up rather than to tear us down, doesn't it? And another thing that I've learned about Foxhole friends is they're willing to be with us through all the seasons of life, no matter what happens. Times can change, we can move, but they show up. So I'm going to ask you to do something important for yourself, for your own personal renewal, and I hope that you'll just keep thinking about it. What I want you to do is I just want you to put your hand up like this. All right? This, my friends, can serve as a guide to your personal renewal and transformation. And that is that if you focus in your life on developing 5 friends, 3 people that maybe that you've lost touch with, that have been there in your life that you haven't talked to in a long time, you really need to talk to them. Reach out to them. Or if they're there right now, call them and say, thank you for being my friend. You're the most treasured thing in my life. I need you now and forever. And then find 2 others. 2 people that you don't know yet. 2 people that are a little different than you are. Maybe they look different. Different race, religion. And make friends with them. Because they will be the ones who help you see the world in a bigger way. And by loving and being loved, not only will you experience personal renewal and transformation and resilience, this will be your way of bringing hope and healing to our world. Thank you.